Well, g'day, folks. Welcome to the Awaken Network podcast. I'm John Tyson, lead pastor of Church of the City in New York, and I'm joined by Chad Bohai, who is the lead pastor of Radiant Central Coast, and Sam Gibson, who leads Pray NYC in New York City. Thanks for joining us. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about prayer, revival, awakening, and what it looks like to seek God for another move of the Holy Spirit in our time. It's great to have you with us.
Well, welcome back, friends, to the Awaken Network podcast.
Yes.
Again, you got Chad, Sam, and John hanging together, just giving our best stuff on prayer, how to become a person who prays, building a praying life, a life of prayer, prayer culture, etc. And it's just been so awesome to hear back and forth of the various things that the Lord has deposited personally at this table in your hearts and through your lives and your history. And so this is going to be a poignant episode that I'm excited to get underway. The title of this episode is called "This Kind," and you're like, "What kind? What are you talking about?" So, John, kick us off here about what we mean by this kind, and then we're going to have a fun conversation.
Yeah, the reason that you have to have or build a praying life is because every natural strategy you have to live for Jesus in this cultural moment is insufficient. We are coming up against things over which our best methodologies, techniques, theologies, trends, and tools have been completely inefficient. And it's that classic scene. It's located in two places in the Gospels, Mark 9. Jesus actually goes up. It's in Matthew 17 too. Jesus goes up to the Mount of Transfiguration. He brings the three with him. And heaven opens, and depending on who you're talking, depending on which gospel, it says, "This is my son, listen to him." And then Elijah and Moses appear, and Peter's just like, "Let's stay here forever. This is amazing." I remember a talk I heard as a new believer, which I always loved, and the talk was called by Mark Rutland, "Just Give Me Jesus." Some people want Elijah, which is the miracle. Some people want Moses, which is the law, but only in Christ did the miraculous and Moses come together in something better. Just give me Jesus. I remember that talk as a new believer. Anyway, So they have that encounter. They go down the hill, and as they come down the hill, they come to the rest of the disciples, and they're in a huge debate with the teachers of the law. And the debate is as why the disciples could not cast a demon out of a boy. Now, I just want to make a point here, and it's this. Anytime you lack power for a situation, you default back to theological debate. And this is what's happened. Wow. The disciples have been commissioned to cast out demons. In other Gospels, we know, in Luke's Gospel, they've been sent out, and they come back and they say, this is the 72, not even the 12. "Lord, even the demons submit to us and tremble." And so they've experienced up to this point of the Gospels. Mark 9's late in Mark's Gospel. Matthew 17, late in Matthew's Gospel. They've seen demons come out, but now they're bumping into something, and it won't come out. And so Jesus comes down, and in a couple of these translations, he sighs, and he's like, "Oh, how much longer shall I put up with you, faithless generation?" And then he casts a demon out of the boy. And then there's the interaction with the Father. "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." And then when the disciples pull Jesus aside later and they ask, "Why could we not cast the demon out of the boy?" By the way, I want you to see this. I genuinely think there's something prophetic in this. The demon is in a boy. A child is, and I think this is in some sense what we're facing right now. We do not seem to have the power to reach the generation that is in front of us. All of that. Whatever kind that Gen Z is facing, Gen Alpha is facing, the church seems impotent to reach it. We can't touch their anxiety. We can't touch how they form a sense of identity. We can't touch the way they view God and faith. And so all the mega churches, the largest churches, celebrity pastors are all walking around going, "Why can't we get Gen Z?" And it's because we're coming across something that we do not have the power for. Jesus says, "This kind." What kind? There's some kind of power and principality Jesus is bumping into, the disciples bump into, over which their spiritual power and authority is not enough. And then Jesus says, "You know what it is." So in one gospel, he says, this is Matthew 17, he says, They say, why couldn't we drive it out? And Jesus says, because you have so little faith. And we never put that element in there. It was their lack of faith that stopped their capacity. And so when you live in a time of cynicism and secularism, it robs you of your capacity to believe.
Yes.
And that's why we talk about the importance of studying revival history, studying what God's done in the past, so you're not limited to the activity of God in your generation.
Yes.
You've got so little faith. And Jesus says, truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move and nothing will be impossible for you. But in Mark's gospel, Jesus says this kind can only come out by prayer and by fasting. There are levels in the invisible realm.
Yes.
I mean, we don't want to get too deep into this, and honestly, because it's kind of a mystery and the Bible doesn't get too deep into it. Though the unseen realm and Michael Heiser's stuff, I think, is helpful. So the disciples come up against a kind that they cannot face, they don't have power for. Now, what's so fascinating about the life of Jesus, Jesus doesn't say, okay, folks, I'm going to have to go and fast, and I'm going to have to go and pray. Let me go get powered up. Jesus just says, come out. So Jesus is walking in a level of intimacy, fasting, and prayer that the disciples are not, and therefore he immediately has power that the disciples do not have. And so, again, this kind, what we're facing with secularism, what we're facing with sexuality, what we're facing with how people construct an identity, what we're facing with a spirit of mammon in our world today, whatever we've done to date is insufficient for this kind.
Yes.
We are at the point of radical decline. This is the least religious generation in decades in the US. There's no trace of the Jesus movement left in our society as a whole. We've failed to pass it on to the next generation. And so as a result, what's our response going to be? Some people think the response is tools. If we just come up with new evangelism tools or scale various programs, I'm all for it. It's not going to be enough. Well, if we can just reconfigure church, we need new wineskins. It's new versions of church are not going to be enough. Well, we just need more authentic leaders. More authentic leaders are not going to be enough. Jesus says you're facing something, and the only hope you have is prayer and fasting. And so I think because God has entrusted us with a moment like that, he's also calling us to a kind of prayer and fasting that is like this.
And I love this. Just in alignment, prayer aligns us and brings us access into the presence and power of God. Fasting reveals, like nothing else, our own inner poverty and utter dependency in an ongoing manner before the Lord. And what's so fascinating to me about this passage, John, is that the two things that the disciples asked: one, teach us to pray. Luke 11, we talked about that last episode. Here, why couldn't we? The answer is, it can only come out by prayer and fasting. So there's, again, this isn't just like, oh yeah, some people are into prayer, some people aren't. If you get around to developing a prayer life, good for you and your disciple, or as a church, or whatever agency you have, whatever you're leading, who you're doing life with. This kind can only come about by being aligned in an agreement with the God who has the presence and power. That is the remedy. That is not a luxury. It's a necessity to see the kingdom established in our time. And then accelerated with fasting, it's that voluntary, Lord, I'm spiritually bankrupt. I can't, but you can, you will, you did, and you promised to pour out more, all that we need. And so I love this story because it provokes me as a leader. So much of our time, my time as a leader is trying to solve solutions and how do we advance this and that. And I love this sober warning. This kind that we're all facing is the solution is found in prayer and in fasting, and a reorientation around the person and presence of God, accessing all that he's made available to us, and leveraging that to see this kind bow its knee to the supremacy and reality of King Jesus.
Yes.
Sam, you talk about fasting a lot. I do fast, and I hate fasting.
Yes.
I have the most torture. You know what I love? Feasting. You know what I love? Pleasure stacking. You know what I love? Celebrating. And I do that because sometimes New York will beat you down and it can be pretty challenging. And I'm like, I just need to remember the goodness of God. So I do fast, but I hate fasting. Whenever you're 2 days into a fast, you're like, I never want to eat again.
Yes.
The voice of the Lord is so loud.
Yes.
You're like, man, the word is coming alive. Have you seen this?
Yes.
And what sort of advice would you have for somebody who wants to start a journey other than consistency, not intensity?
Yes.
What advice would you have for someone who's trying to partner prayer and fasting together?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that we growing in prayer and in the same manner growing in fasting at the same time. It's just developing this well and reservoir. John, you hit on this. Like Jesus doesn't call a prayer meeting. He doesn't say, everybody, we got to help this kid. We need to have a little 21-day fast here. We'll do 21 days of seeking God. Jesus says, hey, you know those 30 years where you didn't know who I was? I was hidden being a carpenter with my dad. I was building a secret well. I was often withdrawing to be alone. I was fasting. And so he's got this well. And I think what's happened so often is we know right now we're facing this kind and we're still trying to find other tactics around it. We're still looking sometimes for methods and models. And so I would just say, it's like, I don't know anyone that truly loves fasting. Maybe Lou Engle.
Yes.
Like, you hang out with that crew and it's like, they're calling it another 21-day fast. It's like, I just started eating 2 days ago. It's like, but man,
they need the discipline of eating.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's like, let's talk about feasting. And I think feasting is a huge thing we don't talk enough about. But I would say two things I've seen is in fasting in particular, the best benefit it gives me is it is humiliating to me.
Yeah.
You know, John, Chad, you guys, serve in public ministry spaces, and it's so often that, in any context you're in, people can start to like aspire to your level of faith. Man, you just know the Bible. Man, when you pray, and people can give you this kind of feedback. But what the most humbling thing that happens in my life is when I'm on a little fast window. Man, I love Jesus. I love the Word. But boy, I love a cheeseburger. and no one else knows this internal wrestle. They're, oh, Sam, you're so godly. I've spent like a 7-day fast where the last 4 days really aren't even fasting. I'm mentally preparing my first meal. I'm just like, I'm going to get wings from this place. I'm going to get a steak from this place. And so, but what it is honestly, it's like God opposes the proud and he gives grace to the humble. And I don't even dare, not that I ever necessarily do, but I think more than I realize, I don't dare approach the Lord in strength. I actually just approach the Lord in weakness. And weakness is irresistible to God. Like it's actually irresistible to him. The second thing that I would say is I've just seen, like I have a lineage of tests. I'm in New York City now because I was on a 21-day fast. And just praying through God, I feel like something is shifting. What is this? And boom, a word breaks through. And it's just out of nowhere. I've had staff members, I'm like begging, I need help. One of my closest friends that I work alongside of Tyler's with us in New York, it's like, man, God, I need help. And I just, in a 21-day fast, write down, Lord, I need help. And I write down his name. 15 days into a fast, he texts me, hey man, I think I'm supposed to come down and hang out with you guys. I didn't even reach out to him. It was just like heaven heard me.
Yes.
I have personally fasted and prayed and been given $1 million check. Like just seeking God, going, God, I just believe this is after, like, and have been handed one. And it's like, and that's not a name it, claim it theology thing at all, but it's just like there's a level of breakthrough that's possible. There's so many degrees of it. We could go on fasting forever, but it's just like embrace the weakness to it.
Yeah.
One of the best things for like the church leaders is just to embrace weakness and realize, man, I don't love Jesus nearly as much as people think I do. And that's just, and man, that actually like attracts the presence of God. It's not. And then just the breakthrough I've personally seen, Derek Prince has an incredible book, like Shaping History Through Prayer and Fasting.
Yes.
It is like, you want to bend nations, call fast. I mean, it starts with a simple lifestyle. I'll just say, like, start with a sun up to sundown. That's a great thing. Eat in the morning. When the sun's up, don't eat again. There's so many practical tools that are out there when it comes to this space, but man, just developing a capacity. And often I found it's actually what happens on the other side of a fast that's more significant. Like it's like, yes, it's the revelation window, the word is coming alive, but it's just over time, you're just building this reservoir, and you're building this capacity, and you're just building this desire, and you're just building something that happens. And just seeing the amount of breakthrough that happens to that is just remarkable.
I think it's a combination. I think there's power in short fasts.
Yes.
Wesley wouldn't ordain someone who didn't fast 2 days a week.
Yes.
You know what?
The early church, you were required to fast every Wednesday and every Friday, children included.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like it was. Everyone understood, every Christian, not super Christians, every Christian did this.
What's so fascinating to me, people love Sabbath. Sabbath is, trusting the sovereignty of God, ceasing to work. Fasting is like a not as fun Sabbath. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like,
No, exactly
I'm
right.
trusting that I'm trusting the power of God. I'm not relying on myself. I'm not what I do, except it sucks. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So Sabbath, you're like, yeah, I'm resting. I'm reading literature. I'm pleasure stacking. I'm enjoying. And fasting is like, I'm not eating. I'm not enjoying. I'm struggling. But it's actually achieving the same thing.
Yes.
And I think we need to have these regular practices in our life to draw us. Just one little note connected to the practice of secularism, prayer and fasting and secularism. Secularism, and this is all just Charles Taylor stuff, obviously, but he says secularism is creating what he calls the imminent frame. And the imminent frame says the only reality we have is here and now. It's what other sociologists calls, it's not the scientific method, it's scientism, which is like, this is my religion. This is all there is, all there was, and ever will be. And one of the most important things, why prayer is the most important practice during secularism, is because it's punching holes through the imminent frame.
Yep.
It's calling on something beyond the here and now to break through into the here and now. And Paul says in Philippians chapter 3, that God is their belly. And we're so, it's now, it's pleasure, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. And when you deny yourself, you're helping punch open that imminent frame.
Yes.
And so I think one of the most extraordinary things that you hear when you say, I can't hear God's voice, when you fast, the voice gets louder.
Absolutely.
The imminent frame cracks, light gets through. And it's not all at once, but there has never been, I'm trying to do short-term fast to punch through the imminent frame.
That's exactly right.
And then I'm trying to do one long fast a year.
Yes.
Normally 30 or 40 days a year. And so I tell people, if I ever look like I'm losing weight and looking good, don't talk to me about it. I'm just on a long fast. And I'll be back.
Don't smell my breath.
I'll be back in 6 weeks. But I've never done a long fast and not seen a legitimate breakthrough in my life.
Yes. 100%.
Radical answer, like something that I would categorize as a miracle.
Yes.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts for ministry. Radical breakthrough in my family, impossible situations coming about. And again, we're not earning that. Jesus is telling us, here's how the kingdom works.
Yes. Yeah.
You're aligning with kingdom reality. You live in a war. This is a war zone. Here are the tools. They tear down strongholds. They crack open the frame. They let the light in. And so you're not earning, you're not self-righteous, because the Pharisees, you can do it wrong like the Pharisees. It's in the secret place. Yep. But when you do that, something will happen. Yep. And so I want to call us back to it. Yes. We've had worship movements.
Yes.
We've even had prayer emphasis. We've had justice emphasis. But I don't think we've had a mainstream evangelical prayer and fasting emphasis. And I think we probably need that for this generation. Our response should be, we can't get whatever is holding and terrorizing and oppressing Gen Z back. And out of love like the Father, please, can you do anything? Can you reach this generation, God?
Yes.
Are they going to be riddled with anxiety? Are they destined to deconstruct? Will they only fall away? Will they build identities based on human components and not their divine call? And at some point, someone's going to get the heart of the Father that is like, please, I'm Jesus, I'm coming to you. We need deliverance. And Jesus is going to say, it's through prayer and fasting.
So quick word here, John, because I know this is true it's not necessarily true for you, Chad, but like you and I are the result of we are prodigals running from the Lord and parents who summoned us out of darkness, who called upon the name of the Lord. You know, and I just think so often you talk to parents who are frustrated about like their children's
I had a similar story by my dad at an all-night prayer meeting with college kids.
Of course you do.
2 a.m., I've got him. You can go. He left the prayer meeting.
No way, he prayed through?
That's exactly right.
Dang.
So I just, yes and amen.
And I just want to say this. Hey, if you're a parent and you're really just struggling where your kids are at, this kind only comes out through prayer and fasting. Are you burdened enough? I know you've been trying to get them to meet with a pastor. I know you've been trying to get them to listen to talks, but have you just gone into the secret place with God, given up a meal, and just called upon the name of the Lord with some confidence? And I just want to there is something I feel this for a generation. We talk about Gen Z and Gen Alpha a lot, but man, there is something about this kind that's just so significant to I'm a living testimony of people who've done this for me. My parents did it for me. If your dad did it for you, your dad as well. It's just like, man, who is going to do this for our generation right now?
St. Augustine's mother, Monica, was a godly woman, and she prayed and prayed for Augustine. This is before he was St. Augustine. Prayed for him. And almost everything she prayed, the opposite happened. Augustine was super promiscuous, cauldron of lust, got a girl pregnant out of wedlock, and joined a cult. Bring him to the truth, joins a cult. Give him self-control, gets a girl pregnant. And he's just getting further away. So she goes and sees Bishop Ambrose, and she just won't leave him alone, weeping, my son, my son. And Bishop Ambrose finally, out of frustration, says to her, it is not possible that a child of such tears could be lost. And then Augustine, for the rest of his life, called himself a child of tears, a child of tears. And all of us are children of tears. And my dad tried everything to get me home, grounding me, laws, none of that stuff. But he just in the heavenly went and got me. So I think that's a really strong close and a strong word, which is we need children of tears. Gen Z needs to be children of tears, children of tears to come home. Parents who are looking in the horizons of their life, calling for prodigals through tears to come home. So the kind we're facing, will only come out through prayer and fasting. This is what Jesus said about spiritual failure and how to get spiritual failure. So we hope that as we've been talking about how to build a life of prayer, that this has touched your spirit, that we want to break off any legalism, self-righteousness, and this is just giving you love and devotion for Jesus. And our vision here at the Awaken Network is to help build people who have a vision to build lives of prayer. Thanks so much for joining us.